will today commence debate at 76th session of United Nations General Assembly in New York.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo tasks financial market experts on housing deficit.
Nigeria at 60, photo exhibition holds in Abuja.
We deliver information and educate many of us, especially our youth.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss national identity and security.
You know, Kesley, it is no longer news that Nigeria is battling with challenges ranging from banditry to kidnapping, terrorism, to armed robbery, as well as other criminal acts.
No question about that, Jumai. And these crimes are being perpetrated by persons whose identity is sometimes difficult to ascertain, as they are not yet captured in the nation's database.
Now, as a way to get Nigerians and other residents identified, the National Identification Management Commission was empowered to register all Nigerians and harmonize data from different organizations for proper national planning.
It's in realization of this that a day was set aside annually as National Identity Day with a view to raising more awareness on the significance of identity as a tool for national development, security, and social cohesion.
Experts believe that Nigeria cannot thrive in the 21st century without a functional and reliable system of national identification.
Well, they argue that identity is one of the ways that Nigerians can use to provide social security, create law and order, as well as an organized society.
Indeed, Kingsley. And as part of efforts to ramp up identification project, President Muhammadu Buhari unveiled 3 indigenous solutions by NIMSI. They are NIN mobile app, the tokenization solutions, and contractless Android biometric enrollment system.
Well, at the launch, President Buhari said that the ongoing National Digital Identity Number enrollment is key to tackling insecurity, and that the success of Nigeria as a country would also depend on it to some extent.
So the question is, how many people have so far been enrolled in the National Identity Project out of more than 250 million Nigerians? What is the relevance of the new solutions launched to the success of the national identity? How will the national identity help address security challenges in the country? To what extent has the implementation of the ECOWAS Protocol on Free Movement contributed to the state of security in Nigeria? Well, this is Good Morning Nigeria, the second edition for the week. I am Juma Yusuf. Thanks so much for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Jumai to also welcome you to the program, reaching you live on a network service of the Nigerian Television Authority.
Thanks for joining us. And to begin our discussion this morning, let's take this background report by Ekene Ndulue.
Nigeria, with a population of over 200 million people, no doubt is the most populous country in Africa. With such a large number, security challenges are inevitable. To tackle issues of insecurity effectively, experts say sophisticated methods of law enforcement that involve surveillance and intelligence gathering are required. These sophisticated ways of crime fighting cannot be effected without a proper identity management system. Severally, government officials have made speculations that those responsible for some violent crimes in the country are foreigners from neighboring countries, but this allegation cannot be substantiated, no thanks to poor identity management system. However, the federal government is not unaware of the challenges. In 2007, Nigeria established the National Identity Management Commission, NIMSI, with the mandate to establish, own, operate, maintain and manage the National Identity Database in Nigeria. The mandate also extends to registration of persons covered by the Act, assign a unique national identification number, and issue general multipurpose cards to citizens of Nigeria, as well as those legally residing in the country. So far, more than 63 million Nigerians have been enrolled as NIMC continues to target more registrations through several policies, which include making it easy to link the NIN with SIM cards.
It will increase the confidentiality and privacy of your number significantly because it allows you to do many activities online without going anywhere physically.
Tokenization solution is in line with the efforts of the federal government to enhance data privacy and data security of citizens and legal residents.
The federal government is also not relenting as it has adopted September 16 as National Identity Day and has supported the enrollment of Nigerians for digital identity across the country. How important is the identification project to the country? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be speaking to the issues in a moment.
Thank you very much, Ekene Undule, for that backgrounder. With us in the studios to discuss this subject matter, let's welcome the Director General of the National Identity Management Commission, Engineer Aliyu Aziz. Pleasure to have you.
Good morning, Nigeria. Yes. Good morning.
Also here with us in the studios, regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Abdul Hakim Ajijola, is the Commissioner for Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace and Chair of the African Union Cyber Security Expert Group.
Good morning.
We also have with us in the studio Mike Ejiofor, former Director State Security Services and a security expert. It's a pleasure to have you join us as always.
A pleasure. Good morning, Nigeria.
And joining us via Zoom from California, USA is Ambassador Dauda Danladi, former Nigeria High Commissioner to Pakistan. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Ambassador Danladi, we appreciate your being with us at this time. We know that it's nearly midnight where you are in California, 8 hours behind us at this time. So thanks a lot for your participating in our conversation today. But let's begin with the DG of NIMC, that's Engineer Aliyu Aziz. Well, we know that in recent years, we have started to inch towards, some would say, better management of our national identity system. But the question arises, why, in aggregate terms, 60 years since our independence, we do not appear to have gotten right our national identity management system, which is ordinarily a norm in smaller countries elsewhere on the African continent and indeed elsewhere around the world. What has been the challenge, with the proper management of our national identification system?
Thank you very much. I think the major challenge has been consistency. So an approach to the project. Much earlier before, it used to be like designed as a big bank project. If you remember the SAGEM project that we had 62,000 equipment that went, mobile equipment that went around the country in 3 weeks, and they added 2 more weeks, and they captured more than 2/3 of the adult population. So, but in this new NIMC since 2007, what we adopted is a continuous registration because we don't have the funding to have that kind of massive attention. And also, it has been a continuous process since Obasanjo's time through Yaradua, Jonathan, and right now, government have been putting attention to it. So that is why we spent the earlier years building the system, and since this government came, it made 7 million records, and then we've been increasing the records from that 2015 to now. So it's that consistency and also making sure that all other participants, like it's not only NIMSI that is now capturing data. We have other government agencies too are capturing data, the states are capturing data, and also we have the private sector that are also capturing the data. And we have the banks capturing through the BVN, and we also have the telcos now capturing. So therefore, this working together as an ecosystem, that is only the change that we have from the past attempts. And we believe that this is going to be sustainable, and with the way that we are doing it right now, in the next 2-3 years, we should be able to capture everyone. And then that is the time that we can now start getting the benefits of having an identity management system.
That's good news, and I'm sure Nigerians are aware of how important it is. Mr. Abdul Hakim Ajijola, can you tell us how important this is to the security of lives and property in Nigeria? And do you think Nigerians are taking it seriously?
Good morning. Thank you. I think an identity is a trusted, or it's a vital component for building trust. But I think component here is the key word. I was giving the example a little earlier. Identity and its management is a brick, but you still have the wall, and there are many, many other components that are key. So, for example, recently the U.S. Observed September 11th, and from findings there, only one out of the, I think, 10 or however number of terrorists did not have an ID card, a legitimate ID card. They were in the US legitimately. So that as important as an ID card is, or an identity management system is, I think we should not overstate and make it seem as if it's the only component to security. Of course, there are issues such as surveillance. There are actually issues such as common sense. But having said that, in almost all the challenges, the security challenges we face in this country, there are more important underlying factors. Today, for example, if somebody is kidnapped and they use the same person's phone to make the calls for negotiation, frankly, the ID really doesn't help very much. But if you have the right kind of robust intelligence and security, then I think you would see that the ID card or the ID management system would complement those kind of activities.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdul Hakim. I just want to return to Engineer Aliu Aziz, DG of NIMSI. One point that I would like you to clarify, because you talk now about an ecosystem that incorporates NIMSI and related that data or ID capturing entities, public and private. I've been wondering over the years what use it is that we make of the data collected or captured by the National Population Commission with regard to registration of births and registration of deaths.
Well, as you rightly said, that both the registration of birth and death is very, very important, and we consider the registration of birth as the input into identity management. We also consider the registration of death as the exit from that system, because right now the over 63 million that we have in our database, there are really some dead people that are in that database, and we need to clear them. And you know, based on the surveys, that more than 60% of, of our population is actually 24 years and below. And therefore, there are also more than 25 million children that we have that are not registered, or even if they are registered, they are not in a digital form, in which, by in this 21st century, you need the information to be in digital form to be utilized. So if we continue to have silos, different silos that can't talk to each other, then that should be the greatest problem. But with the ecosystem now, as I mentioned earlier, both NIMSI and Population Commission are working together to make sure that we link the birth registration to the identity system, and also we link it to the exit of the database when someone is dead. But we have not yet reached the level, but there's very much high plans that are in place.
What kind of plans? Can you just give a little
Well,
insight?
like I mentioned, the strategic roadmap that has been approved by Federal Executive Council in September 2018 has also a component that is linked to birth registration in the hospital. And as you know, it's only this July that the National Assembly joined Senate and House that passed the borrowing plan. So is that of the identity is also included to the tune of $365 million. So we have selected the project coordinators and also the other members. So we are just setting up to make sure that those things happen.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Aziz. We'll return to you. Now, let's bring in Mike Ejiofor, a legal practitioner and, of course, former director of DSS. Well, it's probably, an open question, but how much of an impediment has our poor or suboptimal national identity management been a factor in effective response to security challenges that have escalated in recent years?
Yeah, it's a major factor. I'm happy too that the DG NIMS is here, and why I was invited to this program and I looked through the internet, I discovered, without making a case for them, I discovered the major problem NIMSI has is the issue of funding. I recall when they talk about requesting for 30 billion and all they got in how many years was about 17 billion thereabout. And when he assumed office, he had made 700 and something million thereabout. I'm sure he's here, we'll cross-check all this information. And the major problem we are having in implementation of the strategy is that there's no central database to control all this. NIMSI is there issuing NIM. They cannot issue cards. I don't know how many cards. I think he will confirm that. How many cards have been issued? People who register, though I saw when he talked about that your NIM number is more important than having the card, but it's also important that they have constraint producing the cards. And I don't know how many people have gotten the card. It affects, the implementation of certain strategies in security, in surveillance, in records. We have so many bodies who don't even know our population. The National Population Commission cannot conduct elections. When last did we conduct elections? Census, sorry. So if they cannot conduct a credible census to know how many we are, how do we plan? It's a major problem. And NIMSI came up 60 million in how many years from 2007 to now? It's not significant. And most importantly, I think they need to go more in terms of sensitization of the people, the need for them to come and register And let us start from there. At least if you have an offense committed, either against the state or criminal offense, the issue is just take the name. If we have a coordinated and central base, you have all the information there. Instead of somebody coming to give you information, haphazard information, or the information he wants to give and he wants to keep. But it's important that we have all this. It's affecting security. And take the SIM registration, for instance. How far have we gone about the SIM registration? How effective is it? We're talking of the criminals, as long as security agencies and government are adopting plans, the criminals are also ahead, planning on what to do or how to counter such policies. For instance, the kidnap case happens. Instead of using their phone, they now use the victim's phone to make contact. So how do you trace? And when they make contacts, they switch off the phone. But if you get the coordinates of that area, which is not outside the purview of NIMSI, you should be able to. So the point I'm trying to make that it's important that we know most Nigerians, at least let's have up to 70% or 80% for now. When the DG was talking, he talked about in the next 3 years, all Nigerians will be captured. I don't see that possibility. It's not possible because the funding is not there and a lot of constraint. And that's how it's also going to be affecting the security applications or looking for solutions to our security problems.
Indeed, Mr. Mike Ejafo, you've raised some pertinent issues. One question I would like you to ask is, if they use, like in security, they use the number of the kidnapped victim, when you have a synergy like NIMSI is trying to have with security operatives, can't that phone number be traced? Don't we have the capability to do that in this country?
Of course, with the SIM card registration, you trace the location. But what these people do, they don't even make the calls where the victims are. They move out of the place. Or when they make the calls, they move to another location. So it becomes a problem for you to trace and switch off the phone. But what I'm saying is that if all Nigerians are registered with NIMSI, it's going to be easier for us in the security practice to at least track down these people. We are not talking of the kidnap now, we're talking of NIMSI because the issue of kidnap is a different kettle of fish. The question is, how do these people move en masse, go to schools? And so we are not talking about, we're talking of, let us have basic records, first of all, before we start looking into other
very
issues.
good data.
Yeah, it's good database.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Let's go over now to Ambassador Dauda Danladi, who is with us via Zoom. Ambassador Dauda Danladi, we're just trying to understand the whole issues around the suboptimal nature of our national identity management. Is it necessarily the case that, in a sense, we are grappling with our colonial heritage? And so you ask yourself, who are those that are supposed to be captured in our national identity management base, database? Are we seeking to capture real Nigerians? Or we are seeking to capture persons, who claim to have social and cultural ties across borders, and therefore the whole issue of border communities?
Thank you very much. Even though there was the question, the voice was struggling, but let me say this, that it is generally agreed, there is a general consensus that a robust national identity management system is coterminous with accelerated development. The absence of a robust, well-coordinated and organized national identity system give rooms for all kinds of crimes, from cases of impersonations, kidnappings, banditry, acts of terrorism. These are all, there is a nexus between these crimes and the lack of a robust national identity management systems. And it is my hope that government will again give a lot of attention to the issue of having a robust, well-organized national identity management system. For example, you find Nigerians, they have multiple identities. PENCOM, for example, PENCOM Commission, the Nigerian Immigration Service, the National Health Insurance Scheme, the INEC, they all have separate databases, but it is not synergized so that it can provide a leverage to a law enforcement agency to authenticate and verify the identity of individuals. And in a situation where you have multiple organizations having various databases without a collaborative, well-coordinated synergy that can provide a centralized system, as was observed by our health expert there, then of course you are bound to have problems. If I may just quickly bring an example of what happened in Pakistan, my experience in Pakistan, you find that everybody has an identity card. If you are traveling from one town to another, at the motor park, you have to show your national identity card. The number will need to be registered and you can be traced. In Kenya, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, based on the security challenges, they were able to develop a robust national identity to the extent that, for example, in Kenya, you cannot even get married without your national identity card. You cannot get an employment without a national identity card. You cannot carry out a lot of activities without a national identity card. And similarly, countries like Tanzania, countries like Uganda have all been able to develop a robust national identity management system. So I think in Nigeria, I think we have come to a stage whereby greater attention should be paid. We should allocate funds. In the past, there was this information that the World Bank, the European Union will assist us in building a robust management system. I don't know. For example, there is no way you can have effective security control in a country where Federal Road Safety, for example, have their own separate databases. The NDLE, NAPTIP, all have their different databases. And it does not provide for an effective synergy that can give our law enforcement agencies the leverage to identify, verify individuals. And then when you look at the porous nature of our borders, vis-a-vis, for example, the ECOWAS moratorium on free movement of people. And without an identity card, without an authentic, verifiable management identity system, there is no way you can be able to identify illegal immigrants, you can to identify legal immigrants, to also identify and trace and track criminals. It's not possible. When people come to perpetrate all kinds of activities or crimes in the country without a robust identification system, how do you trace them? How do you track them? So I think these are the problems, and I think there is the need, really, that attention has to be given. We must have a robust identity management system. In the US here, once a child is born, he is given a social security. And with that social security number, you can have all the data and information about that child up to the time he exited this world. In other countries like Morocco, Morocco have even introduced additional security chips that can control the flow of migration from their country. I see no reason why, at this point in time, in view of the various challenges that we have, there is the need for us to have a well-coordinated and robust management information identity system in the country.
Ambassador Dado Ladi, you've raised some issues with examples of African countries being able to capture their citizens, have an identity, and know where a citizen is at a particular time. In Nigeria, we keep saying no funding, government, and all that. Have we, in a way, looked inwards to look at us as a people, you know, ready to work with government to make sure that this thing works in Nigeria? And having an identity, I believe, anywhere in the world is a very important component, isn't it?
Yeah, well, now you are bringing the issue of the concept of identity, the integration of various components of Nigeria, people to have that sense of belonging. Again, it boils down to government providing the necessary impetus for people to be patriotic, for people to be committed, government to provide level playing field, the issue of justice, equity, and fair level playing field, so that everybody identify with the entity of Nigeria. And I think that will be subject for a discussion at some other fora. But the crux of the matter, if you visit just Tanzania here, Tanzania, their system ties down the identity with other relevant organizations like the Federal Inland Revenue Service. It ties down the identity to other relevant organizations so that at any point in time, you can be able to access it. But I think, again, there's the need for advocacy, there's the need for education. The state government, the local government, all hands have to be on deck to ensure that we have a robust identity management system in the country.
Okay, Ambassador Donladi, thank you very much for your responses to the questions we asked. And maybe I'll have the opportunity of coming back again to one of the aspects I asked, namely whether we are grappling with our colonial heritage in the efficient management of our national identity system. But we're going to pause here and return to our Abuja studios, returning again to the DG of NIMSI. DG NIMSI, yeah. Just thinking about national identity management, I mean, it's fairly easy to assume that this isn't rocket science and that the building blocks for an efficient identity management system ordinarily is within and amongst us. You and I come from some location, some place, and we also culturally relate to the head of that place. In other words, we have our roots somewhere in this country. So why is it difficult for me to get a paper, I'm not saying me now or you, for instance, to say, this is who I am. Look, I mean, I'm happy that Ambassador Donladi cited those examples. In the 80s, well, 80s, that's about 30-something or more years ago, what you would refer to as casual workers, laborers or gardeners, in southern African countries, they had a national ID card. So, what is the challenge with just mining the data and getting people to have a national ID? What is the challenge? Apart from, if we can say funding, but how does that funding challenge manifest?
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I see it that the problem we have been having in Nigeria is that we know too much. We know how to do it also.
We know everything.
Yes, but it's the doing. So there's a gap between knowing and doing. And in NIMSI, that is the gap that we have been trying to minimize. And we have been doing that. Right now, you know that you cannot get a passport or renew your passport without providing your NIN and they will check that NIN. Your information in our database and that of immigration have to tie. The same thing with PENCOM, because PENCOM too has been mentioned. And the same thing with road safety for driver's license. So the same thing with JAM. So all these, there were issues that we have gone through and resolved them. We have not resolved all. We have not, throughout 2017, we came up with regulations. There is the law. We have come up with regulations also. And also there is high level of support from the president recently to upgrade this system. The Federal Executive Council approved 25 billion for us to carry out this. So we are right now not talking that we have funding challenge. The same thing I've talked about, the roadmap and the ecosystem, which the World Bank, the EU, and also AFD, which is the French Development Agency, and the National Assembly too, they have approved. We also have our board that is made of all these different agencies that have been doing that. Recently, NHIS also have been doing this, implementing that need. So we have commenced, and that is why I have very good roadmap that I can see it in the next 2-3 years. We should be able to enroll everyone, because we have this, we are all working together. We are breaking those things, and the knowing-doing gap has been now reduced to seamless way of working.
I'm just wondering, Jumai, what is the organizational outlay for NIMSI? How widespread are you throughout the country?
Well, we are spread out. We are all over the nation. We have about 4,000 staff. We are in every local government. And before, we were thinking that if we had only about 1,000 centers, we were thinking that if we have 4,000 centers, then we will be able to solve the problems. But as the SIM-NIN registration have shown, now we have more than 8,000 centers, and still it is like a drop in the ocean. So the population is also huge. Therefore, our plan is to have, like, say, 20 or 30,000 centers, so that it should be streamlined and simplified, being convenient for every person. So that is why the private sector, the telcos, the banks, immigration, PENCOM, everywhere that they can register you for the NIN. That is what the ecosystem means. And there are also some states that are already keyed in, but not all the states. So we have to do more to now bring in the states also in the picture. So it's, I think most of the problems have been resolved. Now we are at a pedestal. That is why we can see that in the next 2 years, we should be able to enroll everybody. And then we'll be talking like other climes that every child that is being born is registered. Every child that is going to school, they will ask the child for the NIN, just the way that they will ask you if you need your passport or driver's license as an adult.
Okay, you're talking about 20 to 30,000 centers.
Yes.
To be able to capture every Nigerian.
We have more than 8,000 now.
Do you have enough manpower to do that?
That is why we work as an ecosystem. All the manpower under the telcos are also engaged to carry out this activity. We also have more than 200 licensed partners that are carrying out the activity. The same thing with all the outlays of PFAs that under the PENCOM, they are all outlets for capturing. And all banks are also part of the ecosystem. So that is what we've been talking about, that if you say only NIMSI, then NIMSI will come up with big budget that we need 10,000 people, we need, or like the Sergeant project, we need 62,000 equipment, we need 62,000 people to even just hold the equipment. And for every equipment, you need 2 to 3 persons to do that. So by the time that you reach government, they'll say there is no money. So that is how we came up with the ecosystem approach to have everybody that is doing something to do with data to then be part of it and get the appropriate funding.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Abdul Hakim Ajijola, well, I know that on Good Morning Nigeria in the past, you had raised concerns about the multiplicity of data capturing outlets and what harm that might pose to the integrity of data that is mined. The DG NIMSI has already explained now why they are taking that approach. Do you still have those concerns? That's one leg of the question. And secondly, is it necessarily the case, for instance, that perhaps we have not, as much as possible, energized the populace to get on the national ID database by requiring it more often for certain transactions or for certain kinds of activities?
Okay. First and foremost, I think I and many others, we do have our concerns. The concerns remain. But one also does have to appreciate that one does need to be pragmatic in the sense that if government doesn't have the budget, it still has to be done. Because I think, like I said much earlier, a sound ID system is part of building trust. Then also in terms of the energizing question, I think we also have to look at, we've not done a very good job as a society in explaining what is the value proposition. I'm not sure so much about the forcing, but there are other concerns that I think I would like to quickly raise, if you don't mind. The first one was when I heard this story about even in the motor park, you have to show ID and stuff. It raised the specter in my mind of a surveillance state. And I think we have to be a bit careful that in trying to use identity management to solve what is clearly a very acute and painful set of security issues that our society is currently experiencing, that we don't set ourselves up by creating a bigger monster that may consume our personal privacy and those kind of issues. Because even when we talk about, people can hack into the database, there might be abuse, because even this collection of data by the private sector is a fundamental shift of power from government custodianship to some level of private custodianship that I think we've not fully appreciated the checks and balances. But even government itself, we have to be careful. What if government itself abuses our own identity data? And so I think in our legislation, we do need to look at possibly creating some kind of rule for ombudsmen who would be able to actually independently look at citizens' concerns vis-a-vis whether their data, their identity data, has been used correctly or not. I also think that the issue of having a central database is a fundamental misunderstanding of the ecosystem that we are endeavoring to build in Nigeria. What we are looking at is federation of various databases, because I'm sure the DG will elaborate further. NIMSI's role is to create basically a foundational identity. Are you who you say you are? Finish. It is the duty of road safety to say, are you eligible to drive? The duty of INEC to say, are you eligible to vote? And so on and so forth. And immigration, are you eligible to travel? The other issue that is of great concern to many of us is the issue of functional creep. We may have created a national identity database to do X and therefore address problem X. But sometimes in life, once the database is there, you have functional creep, people will start using it for Y or for Z, which may not have been part of the original intent. And that's also back to why we need to keep the NIMSI database as much as possible to remain foundational identity. That's it. Then we can now have those other federated organizations that would have their own databases. It's the interoperability that is key, not the centralization of the data.
No, could you explain further, I mean, what you mean? There's no system that is foolproof, almost, but if government is the primary or chief custodian of national identity data, that helps in terms of planning, that helps in terms, that helps in terms of security management, and that also ultimately helps in just management of the social environment. Earlier you were talking about the surveillance implication. You are aware of this. Is there any country, advanced country, where, for instance, you want to buy a train ticket and they won't ask you for your ID?
Well, but that's the point. For example, in the UK, there is no central database. That's it. So there are different models. All I'm saying is that sometimes in life, because you have a pain in your foot, does not mean that you set up your foot to be cut off. So that we must also understand that identity and identity management is part of a bigger set or one component of a bigger set of solutions. So as important as identity is, like I said, it is what enables us to develop a trusted environment. That trusted environment is much more useful in terms of building our economy, like you've said, developing planning ideas. But in terms of core security, I'm not saying it's not important, don't misunderstand me. But what I'm saying is that I think sometimes we oversell it as the silver bullet, as the panacea. And it's just a component, important though it may be. And like you know, forgive me, but really at the end of the day, remember we are getting to a point where we can now do other things with these databases. Some of those other things are actually very good. But if you begin to look at, there are risks, and we must also factor those risks and make sure that we mitigate them upfront. We must make sure that as we are building out these databases, the security and privacy of the citizen is also taken into account.
I think, indeed, it should be taken into account. Let's look at Mike Ejiofor. Security agencies rely heavily on this identification of people across the country, and some have called it the game changer for tracking and unveiling the identity of terrorists. Without a central database, what is the possibility here?
It's not very possible. Now, I'll give you an example. INEC number of registered voters in 2019 is over 84 million. NIMSI has over 60 million. If you talk of our telephone GSM, it runs into hundreds of millions, or over 100 million. I don't have the exact figure now. Now, how do we clean up all this if we don't have a central database? It becomes a problem. So we need to start from NIMSI. All these other agencies, road safety, immigration, should key into NIMSI to at least know the number we have in their database. Then we can now start talk of cleaning up. Because if you look at the INEC register, for instance, you should be over 18 to register as a voter. So we'll have that at 18 million. All the people who registered, is it the same record they have in INEC that they have in NIMSI? It becomes a problem to track some of these criminals. Go to road safety, Federal Road Safety Code, the same problem. How do we now get people who are eligible to pay taxes from Federal Inland Revenue? Are they complying if you don't have all these records? So it's a challenge, a very big security challenge. No matter how, we must not run away from it. The fact remains that whether we like it or not, I like the optimism of the DG NIMSI that in the 2 to 3 years, everybody will capture. That is not possible. we must face facts. We can capture a good number of Nigerians. Because some people say from now to tomorrow, they are not ready to submit themselves for capturing. So how do we do it? You need to mobilize people, you need to sensitize people. Like Mr. Jula said, let us not shoot ourselves, but let us have the basics first before we start talking. So without this database from NIMSI, National Population Commission, we're still going to be facing the security challenges we're facing.
But I'm just wondering, I've been just trying to get into the mind of a security operative. It's virtually like you are flying blind when you don't know the persons or people you're dealing with. We know that there's a police department where you have fingerprinting and so on, and you get temp printed, and usually when you're applying for either a passport or some kinds of visas. But if my name is Kingsley Osadolo, for instance, I mean, without an ID card, people can do all kinds of things to say this is their ID card. So I go elsewhere. Instead of saying that my name is Kingsley, I say my name is Kenneth. And you say, what's your last name? I can say any name. You know, I can say Osayomabo, which is still K-O. So how does the law enforcement officer, on the face of it, deal with me? And my ID card that I'm carrying, the fake ID card, shows that I'm KO.
Honestly speaking, it couldn't have been better put. Security agencies are really flying blind. Because if you have a database that there's a convict, it reflects in the database that this man has been convicted. So you don't need to travel to wherever than key in the name, and you see that this man's records show that he has been convicted of one offense or the other. And it makes it easier. Do we have that? Do we have the technology to drive this? The answer is no. Police criminal records is keeping its own. The state security service is keeping. Immigration is keeping. How do you track people coming into who are illegitimate migrants coming into Nigeria? It's a problem, and I think we must prioritize the issue of security by streamlining all these agencies. Let us have a strong central database. It's key to fighting off our...
Juma, Mike, with the point you just made now, I mean, what is just triggered in my head is the latest jailbreak in Kogi. Ajijola, this question is coming to you. Yeah. You know, when we have these jailbreaks, they say hundreds have fled. I think about 100 or so of them were either recaptured or returned voluntarily. But oftentimes, we don't get to hear about the actual number that get returned to the cells or get captured. You always have some escapees who get missing. And there is hardly ever any information about, what happens unless that individual gets into trouble subsequently. Now, here we are, Ajijola, as part of the utility of a central database. I've seen instances, reports of a person who committed a crime 30-something years ago. And he had been on the wanted list. Maybe he had broken free from a jail or something, or he had been on the wanted list. And he had, of course, done all kinds of things to stay out of trouble. And he was still staying out of trouble, and then one day, law enforcement officers would knock at his door. And they pick him up, and he says, yes, I'm the one you've been looking for. How does that happen?
Again, without trying to get too technical, it's not about a centralized database. It's about federating different databases. For example, NIMSI today, its focus and its business is and should remain foundational identity. Are you actually the Kingsley you claim to be? Now, if something happens, by all means, you should have a criminal intelligence database which is linked to NIMSI, but is not necessarily integral to NIMSI. Technology today allows you to very, very easily and simply do this. So, for example, the prison system should have simply a database of all prisoners. I mean, how do you even plan the feeding of prisoners if you don't even know the prisoners you have? again, there is no reason why that database, if you want to verify that prisoner A is actually prisoner A, you can do that authentication and verification with the NIMSI database. But the prison system itself keeps that database of prisoners. The intelligence community and with the law enforcement keeps its own database. So I think we have to be a bit careful when we say central. One of the reasons, with due respect, that NIMSI has struggled over the past years was because its database had too many, what I would call extraneous components. Because the original committees that put it together consisted of people from law enforcement, intelligence, and everybody wanted to have their own thing, the information that was important to them in that central database. And basically, it was too unwieldy. I recollect, I think the NIMSI database had something like 87 different items, whereas possibly today we are looking at less than 15. So there does need to be that division of labor, that efficiency. So I think we are actually going in the same direction. All I'm saying is that it's not about one single central database. But what happens is that you can federate these different databases so that the specialized organization, such as, for example, the DSS, keeps the kind of data it needs for its purposes. That's the whole premise. Now, as I said, we do have to be careful, because just as we know that abuse can occur within the private sector, it can also occur within the public sector. So we have to be very careful about what kind of checks and balances, so that we do not have somebody, for example, because I work in law enforcement and I'm trying to chase somebody's girlfriend, I go and find out all the information about them so that I can put them in trouble. What I'm saying is that abuse does happen. And so it's very important to make sure that those kind of information about us are subject to very, very strict privacy rules and regulations and auditing.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdul Hakim Ajijola. We'll come back to you. We'll take a break now. When we return, the conversation continues.
All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Let's return to Ambassador Danladi, who is still with us via Zoom from California in the U.S. Ambassador Danladi, of course, I'm sure you've listened to some of the contributions by our other guests, particularly with regard to what to capture and what, of course, we can also use with it, which takes me back to one of the questions I asked earlier. I mean, some persons would argue that part of the challenge that we face is that we don't know exactly, whom we are seeking to register as Nigerians and therefore give them our national ID card. You were talking earlier also about, managing the ECOWAS protocol on free movement. But again, how Nigeria is not the only country that has borders with other countries. Other countries that have relatively efficient national ID management system do have neighbors, but they're able to, rein in their nationals and then give them the ID. I was saying earlier as an example that you and I mean, we come from some location. We come from some location and we can be properly identified by our relatives or our village head or some other persons. Why have we not been able to deploy this as part of an effective tool to truly capture Nigerians who are legitimately so?
Well, if you want to go back to historical perspective, you will recall that the amalgamation of Nigeria was based on the regionalization, and of course, the colonialists at that time, it was a promotion of tribal politics, and at the end of the day, each region was competing for the scarce resources. So the issue of national identity in the true sense was somehow lost. But coming back to the issues that you have raised, I think when you look at the ECOWAS region, for example, and the ECOWAS protocol, ECOWAS protocol gives rights to citizens within the ECOWAS for free movement of goods, services, and people across the ECOWAS region. And it was based on the understanding of ECOWAS heads of government that it will promote trade and investment. And I think to a large extent that has been done. If you look at the record of volume of trade within the ECOWAS region, it has hit about almost $208.1 billion. 137 billion is for export, and about slightly over $80 billion is for import. And of course, Nigeria accounts for about over 70% of the volume of trade. But having said this, the ECOWAS moratorium or free movement protocol has its own disadvantages, because what has happened is that, yes, when people are free to move and they move freely, there are supposed to be antidotes to ensure that trans-border criminal activities do not thrive. If you look at in the recent past, I think drug cartels, human traffickers, and of course have hijacked the free trade movement. It's mind-boggling that an estimate by a reliable source identified that over 6 million guns are in the hands of non-state actors, in comparison to about just 500 and something thousand that are with the armed forces. How do you explain that? Of recent, I heard the new DG, General Marwa, give an account of his 100 days in office over drugs used worth over 80 billion naira. Now, what does that tell you? We need to really look at NIM, is it NIM called our National Identity Management Commission. We really need to give it very serious attention. If you do not have, you cannot identify your citizens, you cannot be able to put a very strong border surveillance and control, then of course you are open to all kinds of criminal activities in the country. And this goes to explain some of the rising cases of insecurity and challenges that Nigerians are facing. This protocol, yes, gives the right for people to move freely, to reside, but there is a caveat. And that caveat is that these citizens must have valid travel documents. And in addition, countries, you would refuse to admit citizens from other countries based on your domestic laws. And therefore, going forward, I strongly think that the issue of national identity is just.
Ladi, your Zoom just went off. I hope you'll come back before the program ends. Let me now return to the Director General, National Identity Management Commission, Aliu Aziz Abubakar. We're talking about having a census, which we've not had in a while. Okay, Ambassador Ladi is back. Can you continue, please?
Well, thank you very much. Possibly I'm lost, but what I'm trying to say is that a robust national identity management system is germane to our national development. We cannot afford going forward implementing the ECOWAS protocol without a review. We cannot afford our borders to be open to all kinds of movement without identification. And I think the country needs to actually support the National Identity Management Commission so that they will be able to have a robust data, a security. Am I lost? Oh, okay. So I think, I don't know where I've stopped. What I'm trying to say is that the ECOWAS free movement has its advantages. Yes, it has boosted trade and investment within the ECOWAS region, but at the same time, it has its drawbacks because it has been hijacked by drug cartels. It has been hijacked by armed traffickers and human traffickers. And the only way that we can be able to bring certain sanity into the ECOWAS free protocol is to make sure that we have a robust national identity management system in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Ladi. Aliu Aziz Abubakar, all these things we've been talking about, know where somebody comes from, coming from a place, Ladi come up, and I come from a place like Borno, where the border is so porous. In Borno, you don't even know who is actually a Nigerian and who isn't. We've not had a census since 2006. NIN came up 2007. You were talking about the identity ecosystem that will be able to address all this. Can you break it down for us briefly, the framework of the identity ecosystem?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. So, as my colleague rightly says earlier, that the national identification number is the foundation. So that is the focus of NIMSI. All the other ones, we classify them as functional. You understand? They do their own function, but they need something that will link each one of those functions, and that is where the national identification number comes in. Therefore, the ecosystem approach is that all the participants in this field should come in and capture this data. Why do we do that? Because it's not all the citizens that are friendly to come to NIMSI. As we know, some of the candidates only go to the security agencies' places. And once they go there, then they are their own clients. Then even if they don't have the NIN, there should be a desk that they should capture the data and put the person in the NIN. Because next time, if he comes up somewhere else, they already have the NIN of that person. So that is why we have the ecosystem. The ecosystem is to allow all other agencies to be able to capture this foundational data so that we will capture everybody. And until we capture everybody, then we will not be able to get the value of the NIN. And also when we talk of centralized database, as my colleague says, it's not really centralized that you have all the data. Before, as my colleague rightly says, we were capturing up to 87 fields of data. But we realized that we don't need to. Like, we don't need to capture your blood group. So only what identifies you as a person.
Isn't that important, capturing the blood group
yes,
in case of accidents?
Yeah, it is important, but it's the work of the health insurance, NHIS. So all we need that, you need your NIN in the NHIS to now say, who are you? And that basically, what differentiates you from others is your biometrics, your face, your fingerprint, your iris. And if every agency is creating that biometrics, then it's going to be expensive. So that's why NIMSI will only do these biometrics and give you the NIN. And it is the NIN that you require in all these different databases. That is what makes the linkage and make it that it looks like a central database. And also, if we talk about security, that we know that every incident, every crime must leave a trace. There is no perfect crime at all. Therefore, either you leave your driver's license or your passport or your telephone number or your face or your fingerprint, something must be there.
Or your hair.
Or your hair. So once you get those things, then you will be able to get to one of the databases. And from that one of the databases, then your NIN will allow it to be linked with all the remaining databases.
Okay.
And unless we do that, we'll just be fumbling.
There are a number of issues I would like you to respond to, and this also came up from the other guests in the course of this conversation. Well, one, why is the NIN different from the number engraved on the national ID card? Because I recall when you were saying, go and get your NIN, you were our guest here about 2 years or so ago, go and get your NIN. And that is that NIN that is on the piece of paper that you were given at the point of registration. Which is more convenient? Is it your plastic ID or the piece of paper? The piece of paper can get worn, it can get torn. And it's a struggle to remember your NIN, remember the number that is on your card. So why is the difference, why the difference between your NIN and then the number on the card?
Well, severally we explain, and also as my colleague says, that privacy by design. That card has been designed with the privacy in it. The number is inside the chip. It's not just at the face of the card. You need equipment to really read that number. That is where the privacy comes up. And also the law also says that no one should use your information unless you are there that you give consent. You give consent if you go to PENCOM and you want to have a service. That is when they can now check and there is logs for every person. And also there is the data protection aspect of it. So all these are integrated. So that is why your number is not on the card. And also we have set it time without number, that this is 21st century. You do not need the card. All you need is the number. Just the way that you give me your telephone number, you don't have to go and bring the card that shows that is your number. Then NIMSI should provide a way that you can verify and authenticate that particular number. Right now, you can do it on your phone. That is the mobile app that has been.
It's a big challenge, though.
Yeah.
But I've tried
So
a number of
you
times.
you can do those verifications, and all the other agencies that are allowed to capture data are also allowed to verify this information. So that is the way that the systems work.
Okay, in other words, at some point you have to memorize your NIN so that it becomes part of you.
Yes, or if you can't memorize it, then you provide your face or your fingerprint, then it can be checked against.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
how soon? Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Juma.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I know we are getting pressed for time. Ajijola raised the point.
Yes.
I think Mike also stressed on that. There are certain, if you like, captive registrants.
Yes.
Prisoners, for instance,
yes.
whose record can immediately get into the system. Convicts, XYZ. Is NIMSI working on this? With, let's say, with the Correctional Services Authority, so that those they are there. You register them. They have their NIN, everything, and then so that when they are out, it's easy to track them. That's one. Then secondly, which I consider perhaps more important, in terms of registration of birth, what age group are you seeking to capture now? Couldn't we start getting the NIN at the point of birth? I mean, if I go to get, because you can only get a birth certificate when you go to the Population Commission Center in the local government area to say that my child has been born, this is that. Why don't you just give me the NIN there and there for the baby?
Yeah, so the two things that you asked me, the correctional facilities, as we have said here, is a function. You understand? It's different function from NIMSI. They will capture the data of each of the inmates when the inmates arrives, and in that capturing activity, they will capture the NIN of the inmate. Any inmate that already has a NIN, they don't need to capture the biometrics of the inmate. They will only use that NIN and verify on our system. Therefore, as of now that I'm talking to you, almost all the correctional facilities, they have the needs of their own inmates. So we've been collaborating, as I said, we collaborate with all government agencies to carry out this activity. So that that is done. Then on the age group, there is no age group because you are inheriting a backlog. And by the time that even when you say that you have a program for only children, then the adults that do not have will now disrupt the system. So what we have is an open system and continuous system.
No, yeah, I'm saying
right now,
need at best.
Yes.
When I go to get a birth certificate for my child, and then the child gets the need straight away.
Sure.
But
that
how
is
many
what I
children
said.
are born in the hospital?
Well, you see, majority of
That is the million-dollar question.
Yes.
We use Naira.
You see, you start.
Juma,
You
we use Naira.
You start
somewhere.
Yes, you start somewhere. Start with the hospitals. If you address all the hospitals, it's very, very easy to address other problems. But once you said you will address each one of them, and it is not NIMS's function, it is the Population Commission's function. We work together. We have very good collaboration together to make sure that whoever that is captured has the need. And we are trying to make it digital, not manual system, because we are in 21st century now.
Digitalization is the key here.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Director General, National Identity Management Commission, Aliu Aziz Abubakar, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Good Morning, Nigeria.
Thank you.
Abdul Hakim Ajijola, Commissioner for Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace and Chair, African Union Cybersecurity Expert Group. Your input is always appreciated.
Thank you.
Mike Ejiofor, former Director, State Security Services and Security Expert. As always, we love you having you on the program. Ambassador Dauda Ladi, former Nigeria's High Commissioner to Pakistan, who joined us by Zoom from California. Thank you so much, as always, for your input. We appreciate you. Sports Update is next.
Tuesday's match between Nigeria's Super Falcons and South Africa's Banyana will determine the champion of the maiden edition of the Aisha Buhari Cup. While both teams recorded victories in their first games, the South Africans have an edge, having scored more than the Super Falcons. South Africa defeated Ghana 3-0 on matchday 3 of the competition to announce their intentions at the Mobolaji Johnson Arena, Lagos. And Nigeria's opening game against Mali, substitute Gift Monday's Braves gave the Falcons victory. So while the Falcons need a win, the South African players are good to go with a draw. Already, Desire Oparanozie has given assurance that she and her teammates will be going all out for victory, even though she admits that the South Africans are no easy opponents. Meanwhile, Nigeria forward Paul Onachu has signed a new deal with Belgian Pro League club KRC Jeun. Through a statement on the club official website, the Nigerian international has agreed a one-year contract extension, and he's now tied to the Limbo club until the summer of 2024. Onachu has been rewarded a new lucrative deal less than a week after scoring his 50th goal for Racing Jeun against Rapid Vienna in the opening round of matches in the UEFA Europa League. The 27-year-old made his 51 goals in 79 appearances after coming off the bench to net another winner in the league match at the weekend.
All right, so that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We appreciate your tuning in. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Do have a great day. Don't forget to, step up, be a star, join NTA in the fight against rape and rapists.